Let's turn now to Zach Polanski, Deputy Leader of the Green Party of England and Wales. And Zach, before we turn to the sort of slightly more prosaic issue of British politics and the future of British party politics, your reaction to that news from the IPC confirming famine in Gaza City for the first time?
It's an absolute stain on our society. It's unimaginable horror and tragedy. We also, with due respect, didn't need a report to know how horrendous this is and how much we need to stop selling arms to Israel and sharing intelligence and actually show not just global leadership on this, but moral responsibility and solidarity with other countries who are now speaking out. So it is a stain on British politics that we have not just been complicit in this, we have actively enabled it. And yes, more data, more research helps. But actually, I think we knew a long time ago that this situation could not be allowed to continue.
I can see Tom Fletcher, the UN aid chief, talking in Geneva as we speak, saying the Gaza famine should haunt us all. What do you think, Zach, what do you think the government's response should be? Do you think that this should affect a change, a policy change in the way that the government treats Israel?
Again, it should have affected a change a long time ago. I've lost count the amount of times I've seen our Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, indeed the Prime Minister, say sad words or talk about needing compassion or care or a ceasefire, but at the same time still continuing to sell arms. I think you only need to pay attention for 5 seconds to the situation and realise that's incoherent. Ultimately, we do need to be placing sanctions. We need to be talking about the fact that Netanyahu is a war criminal, and we need to be looking at his arrest. I don't say these things in terms of escalating or ramping up rhetoric. I think this is common sense to the majority of British public that Israel are committing a genocide. They've been doing this for a long time. We know now that it's proven or it's been called a famine. Again, it's totally unacceptable, and we've absolutely been at the heart of what's been happening.
Of course, I should say that the Israeli government continues to deny that there is a lack of food in Gaza and that they are creating a famine or genocide. Obviously, this UN report directly contradicts that and is saying that there is one, and so people can choose which source they believe on that. What would you say Keir Starmer has proffered or held aloft the prospect of recognising Palestine? I assume you would think that should just happen immediately.
It should absolutely happen immediately, and the way that he dangled it as a negotiation tip was again incredibly dehumanizing to the Palestinian people, and also demonstrates that he, whether it's him or the people around him, do not recognize Palestinians' lives as equal and worthy of the rest of us. I think to your point about the Israeli government, you're obviously right as a journalist to put their side of it across too. I think, and you probably agree with this, we have had countless times where presenters or politicians have said what Israel have done is unacceptable when they've targeted schools or innocent people. Israel have denied it, and then just a couple of days later, evidence has come out. What has been response? Israel have said sorry, and there's been another news cycle where more people die. It is completely unacceptable, and I think we have beyond reached the point where Israel's word or the Israeli government's word cannot be taken as fact, and actually people need to open their eyes and their ears and see what we're seeing on our TV screens and phones that is being verified every single day.
I mean, isn't it true, Zach Polanski, that the British government's leverage to do anything about what is happening in Israel is limited to non-existent? I mean, the relationship between Netanyahu and Starmer is already pretty toxic. Netanyahu repeatedly criticises Starmer in the most visceral terms, even for the relatively limited criticism that Starmer has made of Netanyahu and his government. You talk about arms exports. We're a very, very modest arms exporter to Israel. Yes, you can say, well, it should all cease, but we're a very limited arms exporter, relatively limited trading partner. Apart from the United States, the only countries they care about is the United States.
Yeah, and this is what makes it even more tragic, is that if Starmer was getting any political capital out of this in terms of diplomatic relationships with Netanyahu, or indeed if you were very cynical about his own polling ratings right here in the UK, you could see why this had some coherency to it. But actually, Netanyahu doesn't care what Starmer thinks. And so why doesn't Starmer just tell the truth, which he should be doing anyway? And yes, I can see that would have little difference on the world stage. But actually, these things do matter. If you believe in politics, diplomacy and democracy, even in the slightest bit, the things we say and the positions we take have to matter, no matter how much we may have diminished our role on the world stage through Brexit, through various reasons for why the UK is losing its place as a global power. But we still have to care, and these words still have to matter. And then in terms of domestically, we know that the majority of this country are against what is happening. And I think what it's revealing, and it might get into the conversation we're about to have, is the wider gap that is happening between where the public are, yes, on Gaza, but also on austerity, on inequality, on taxing the rich, where people feel like this is a pretty sensible thing to do, and where most of our Westminster politicians are, which seems stuck in a silo, stuck in a bubble, and completely out of touch. And I think issues like Gaza are a real stark reminder of the absolute deadly consequences of what happens when politicians stop listening to the public.
Well, let's turn to this question of a Corbyn-led left-wing party. It would be pretty devastating for you, wouldn't it? And your entire prospectus in the way that you want to lead the Green Party, because it would just split the left-wing vote.
I don't think so at all. First of all, I think it's very much a vindication of everything I've been saying for the last few months, that a bolder Green Party that is speaking out on the issues that people care about, refusing to back down to power and wealth, but actually really saying it how it is, being bold about the things we stand for and the things we stand against, is something that would be incredibly popular. And of course, we're having a leadership election right now that I hope to win in just over a week's time and be able to occupy that space. But what I think this really speaks to is, again, how badly Keir Starmer is failing. Not only are the Green Party surging to the left of him, we got nearly 2 million votes, 39 second-place finishes, our best election results ever. A party that doesn't even exist yet, that doesn't even have structures, is something that people find more appealing than the current supposed left-wing Labour Party. And so what I think this speaks to is that there is enough space on the left wing of British politics to have people and parties rising up. We know we've got Reform and Tories on the right, we've got Lib Dems and Labour, if I'm generous, on the centre or centre-right, which means I think it's about time that we have movements and people who can work together on the left of British politics.
You think there would be enough space in British politics under the aegis of the first-past-the-post system for your radical left Green Party, economically left-wing populist Green Party, and a Corbyn-led Labour Party that was standing on a very similar prospectus?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's radical. I want to nationalise public services. I want to protect the National Health Service. I want to build council houses. I want to tax the super rich. I think that's common sense at this point. But I also think we come back to the point again that Corbyn's party does not exist. And every time we hear about it, there's slightly different versions of it. I'm just open and curious to what that's going to be and how it might look if we cooperate and work together.
Would you want to do a deal with them?
I think it's too soon for deals. What I'm interested more than electoral coalitions is intellectual coalitions. What does it look like? You framed it really well at the beginning of this piece before you introduced me, that so often the intellectual kind of ideas space, both in media and more widely in politics, is dominated by the right. What does it look like when you have more left-wing voices and more diversity of messengers who are saying what is common sense and actually the people in this country want to represent? What that looks like in terms of electoral terms, I guess, is a question closer to the general election. I think more than anything, though, it speaks to the fact that it is more than time for proportional representation. The Green Party have demonstrated that even under first past the post we can and we do win. We know how to do that. But also it is fundamentally unfair to the amount of people in this country who votes far too often aren't reflected in the final results. And it's a time for a reform of our British political system.
Well, isn't it a pretty sad indictment of the Green Party as it currently exists that anyone who is particularly disaffected from the Labour Party, that they're thinking about setting up a new party in the first place? I mean, I thought you were supposed to be the home of left thinking or more radical thinking. These people don't even think about you.
And I don't think it's an indictment, but I do think it's a demonstration that the Green Party for a long time have been really fighting to get more Westminster representation, which we've now got. Now, I want that Westminster representation too, but I think as a party, we've overly focused on what happens in Parliament and the day-to-day kind of runnings of the establishment. I think what people want, and what my Green Party, if I lead, will do, is focus a lot more on grassroots communities, on trade unions, on workers. And yes, to get more parliamentary representation, that bit is really important. But I believe the focus has to be on people and what's happening in their everyday lives, rather than the day-to-day machinations of what's going on in the parliamentary lobbies.
Do you think Adrian Ramsey would stay in the party if you become elected?
I think undoubtedly so. We've worked together for 3 years now as his deputy.
Doesn't seem to like you very much.
No, but we get on collegiately in terms of professionally, really? And I guess that's what matters. I'd rather have a colleague I could go for a pint with. I don't have that. That's fine. But if we can work together professionally and make sure that we're changing this country, I think that's what really matters.
What would your policy be as leader of the Green Party on defence? And if you were to go into a government where you know what the geopolitical situation is like, have you changed your mind about anything with regards to defence? Do you think that we do need more defence spending?
I don't think we need more defence spending. I think what we need is real security, and actually what real security looks like is making sure that veterans aren't homeless on our streets, that our country is actually defended.
So you don't think that we should be matching our fellow NATO countries' pledge to get up to 3% and then 5% of GDP?
Well, I think the fact that it's even 3 or 5% of GDP shows that it isn't a serious target. It was 2%, it was 2.5% and 3%. Measuring anything as a consequence of GDP doesn't make a lot of sense.
Do you think that we need to spend more? All right, well, let's put it a different way. Do you think we need to spend more money on the armed forces given the threat from Russia?
I think we need to spend more money on things like international aid, on foreign development, on making sure that countries are unstable.
We won't be able to spend any money on international aid if Russia invades Europe.
Well, that's the consequence of what happens if you don't spend money on dealing with geopolitical instability situations. So if there is an invasion, then of course there then is a conversation about spending more money. That's very,
sorry,
very...
Zach. I'm sorry. I'm probably being thick. I don't follow. How does us spending less money on aid lead to an increased threat from Russian aggression?
Because political instability in lots of countries around the world, scarce resources, the fact that dictators and regimes are being able to take over, not necessarily in the Russia example, but it all points to the fact that we're having instability right across Europe and right across the world.
But that's nothing to do with aid, is it? That's just Russia. Russia has an expansionist program. Putin has an expansionist program. He's testing NATO defences. He thinks NATO's weak, and your view is we shouldn't spend more money on defence, which would vindicate that view.
It is correct that he has an expansionist program. It's also correct that expansionist programs will absolutely flourish when the people they're looking to expand are struggling with inequality, when they're struggling with breakdown of democratic relationships. The breakdown of the European Union, or rather Brexit in terms of our side of it, has absolutely emboldened Russia.
I don't think Putin cares about that right now, to be honest, Zach. I think he probably cares more and is thinking more about how many tanks we've got, how many anti-aircraft missiles we've got, how many drones we've got, and what our defence capabilities are.
I think it's really naive to think Putin doesn't care about global relationships, and he doesn't care about...
Do you think he cares about how much aid we're giving to different countries around the world? Do you think that's uppermost in his mind when he's considering whether to invade Eastern Europe?
You're asking me two different questions there. I don't think it's uppermost in his mind. I do think he cares, though. I think he recognises when countries are struggling just to survive, when there's the possibility of civil wars within nations. And of course, that is all going to benefit someone who has an expansionist regime. They benefit and profit from instability. I think in all of this, though, what we really need to be talking about is peace and diplomacy. What does it look like when we're building stronger relationships with our European neighbours? What does it look like when we're looking at what's happening in the global south and looking at what can we do to play our role in creating more political stability in there? Of course, that does not rule out spending more on the military in the future. It doesn't rule out if there are invasions or there are wars, what our responses to that would be. But why would we set up something right now that is creating a political context of which there is a war when there is not a war, as opposed to going, how do we prevent war right now?
It's deterrent, isn't it? I mean, the argument is that we have a stronger military and that's a deterrent to Russia.
And I just don't think that's true. I think when we hear Keir Starmer talk about nuclear weapons, £15 billion on nuclear weapons, I think most people...
You'd take that risk right now. You'd abolish our nuclear weapons and take that risk, despite the fact that Russia has clearly got an expansionist program. You don't think it protects us at all?
I want to see a world without nuclear weapons.
Well, of course, we all do. We all do. We'd love to see a world without nuclear weapons, but Putin doesn't.
Well, when you ask me the question about nuclear weapons, it sounds like you don't, because actually...
No. No, it's just that Russia's got them. Russia's got them. That's the problem.
Sure.
I mean, if Putin said tomorrow, I'm going to get rid of my nuclear weapons, I'll be like, well, hallelujah, let's get rid of ours. But you and I both know he's not going to do that. So in that situation, would you keep ours or not?
I agree he's not going to do it. It's also 80 years since Hiroshima, so isn't it about time that we start to show global leadership in getting countries around the table to say, what does it look like to disband our nuclear weapons?
Do you think Vladimir Putin would be very interested in that idea?
I think he'd be very interested if people said we want to have a geopolitical conversation about nuclear weapons. I'm not suggesting he'd do it, but I think the conversation would be interesting to him. And at the moment, it doesn't seem like anyone even wants to have that conversation.
Well, you think Vladimir Putin would be interested in having a conversation about nuclear disarmament at the moment?
I think he would be interested in having conversations about geopolitical situations, about nuclear disarmament. I'm not, again, saying he would do it, but I don't think we should presume people don't even want to have the conversation. I think that's how we get the geopolitics we do, where we have an arms race. And again, I repeat, it's 80 years since Hiroshima. And I think that's how you end up back in the same situation. I can be painted as a radical saying that I don't want countries to have nuclear weapons. I think that's
I don't think that's a radical position. I think probably we'd all agree with that. But the fact is that Russia has them. And one thing I'm curious about, just so you may end up being less radical than me on this, Zach, you may have seen yesterday that there's a bit of a Twitter storm, people saying that I called for 100% inheritance tax. Not completely true, but I did say it should be much higher. What's your view on that? You up for 100% inheritance tax?
I think you're totally right to say it would be much higher. And I noticed you said 100% or 99 or 95. The exact number will come around at the general election. But it's important to say that inheritance tax is looking at about 4% of properties. And I think you put it really well, that there's just mass inequality in our society. And it makes absolutely no sense through bloodline or through nepo babyism that ultimately that inequality carries on based on what you inherit. I think most people in this country want to see a fairer taxation system. And I really welcome the conversation you provoked.
Zack Polanski there, Deputy Leader of the Green Party of England and Wales. Of course, he's running for leader as well. We'll get that result, I think, as he said, in about a week or so.